Hello, welcome again back to uh, Powernomics.com YouTube channel. Your host, Dr. Claude Anderson, and Connecting the Dots. We're gonna pick up where we left off in our last presentation of commentaries. We're gonna talk today about a Q&A, and this Q&A is a little different from the one we talked about in part one. This came in from an individual, and I'm gonna take the liberty of reading this to you, what he says. And I don't know whether this individual is black or whites, but he's trying to get at something that the major white society has been promoting for all through 360 years of slavery and Jim Crow semi-slavery. They keep trying to tell black folk, y'all are not victims. Yes, you were enslaved for 360 years, and you were semi-enslaved for another 100 years, and you've been benign neglected for another 50 years, but you're not victims. You got everything you need. Even though you only have one half or 1% of anything of value in the nation, you're not a victim. I mean, that must be the will of God, or you all just stupid and dumb and can't get anything. He never thinks that, in fact, if he had read my books, Black Labor, White Wealth, The Black History Reader, and Powernomics, he would have known that nothing has happened to black folk by accident. Black folks' condition was imposed on them, has been maintained by people who are greedy, insensitive, and don't really care and have no interest in where black folk are. Black folk are the victims. They have been victimized. They have been depreciated. They have been denied all the basic things that a human being should have had, not only in terms of humanity, but also for wealth, power, resources, privileges, and rights, and a chance to own and control things that are affecting their lives. Here's what this individual says. And again, I don't know whether he's black or white, but listen to this now. What he says here is that Dr. Anderson, in the world, the world should be given a hand to the wicked. That's your black man. You have constitutional rights and civil rights. You have discrimination laws, trillions of dollars in welfare, affirmative action, civil rights lawyers, passing nothing but anti-white laws for 50 years, took control of our inner cities and got people thinking thinking they're victims, held office in America and dominated these major cities up to the present time. They have all the powers that they need. They were given all these powers in the 1965 Civil Rights Law. And this is what they keep telling themselves in an echo chamber, whites to whites, or you got some black conservatives who are outside the system also trying to contain black folk and tell black folk, you're not victims. You all have been getting all these benefits for all these years. That is illogical and it's stupid, because right now black folk are carrying a debt of despair and disadvantages. They're carrying 7 to 8 times their fair share of everything that's bad in society. They own and control on the one half of 1% of value, anything of value. 38% of all the black people in America right now are beneath the poverty line. You got about another third that's right on the edge of going down the toilet, sitting up there waiting on the poverty line. In 2007, black folks' median family income was $9,000. Then it dropped down by 2009 down to $2,000. You own and control nothing. And in this society, what you own and control determines your opportunities and your rights to be a participant, to have fair opportunities to gain and compete in the society. It's what you own and control. You've never gotten anything free in the society. Now let's look at some of these things now about affirmative action he mentioned. I have the dubious honor of writing the first affirmative action plan in the United States that was not contained in the United States Constitution. I wrote it in 1970 for the state of Florida that was approved by the governor and the cabinet system. Approved, and when all over the United States, everybody thought would be give a hand to black folk. But unfortunately, that program was captured and corrupted in 6 months. Instead of being focused on black folk, as I had intended, they shifted it over to minorities, poor folk, people of color, gender, and women's issues, and diluted it down. And to really cap it off, they didn't turn around and put white women into the affirmative action program and gave them the thing called Title IX, which says they're not only equal to black folk, they're over black folk. And 2 congressmen, one white congressman from Virginia and a white senator from Louisiana, stuck that into the 1964 Civil Rights Law as a joke. And they were absolutely amazed that the black elected officials in this country never pushed back against it or said that it ain't going that way. You cannot stick white women into an affirmative action program and pretend that they are a minority. White women are not a minority. Women in general are not a minority. Women own and control. They got about 38 to 39%, 48 to 40, 48 to 47% of all the jobs in America. They got about 51% of the population. They got about 65% of all the college degrees. They got about 87% of the wealth. They got two of the biggest mortgage companies and banks in the United States. They inherited, they co-own, and they control and co-influence everything that the white man got during slavery. They are not a minority. What they've done is take a majority, which was the women, and stuck them into the affirmative action program and corrupted and bankrupted. And they did. And in reality, the white man right now is a minority. And if he wanted to, that's why now he's coming up with a concept calling white man a socially disadvantaged group, that they should be getting special rights and privileges, even though they only control 98% of everything already. And they're going to try to put them into an affirmative action. And so that ain't going to go that way. I wrote that plan for black folk back in 1970. It has been corrupted for everybody except black folk. And it was written to help balance out what black folk should have gotten in response to the Dred Scott decision of 1857, which says a black man has no rights that a white man is bound to respect. A black man is not a citizen. He cannot own land. Everybody else coming to the country can get what they want. Immigrants came to this country, and what people don't tell you, immigrants came to this country for a very specific reason. It was identified on the Statue of Liberty, where it's give me your tired, your poor, and poor. Listen, you're tired and you're poor, begging to be free. They were poor. They came here looking for something. They came here to be enriched. And how would they be enriched? Immigrants came to this country. That's why they call it a land of immigrants. They came here to be a part of the controlling ownership class, to own and control resources. And they put that into what a concept called the American dream. Come to America, instead of breathing to be free, get free land and free black labor. And that's what the immigrant program was set up for. Anybody coming here as an immigrant could get free land and free black labor, point one. Point two, and that the immigrants come in, they'd be in the second class category called management. If they cannot own businesses and control land and resources, they'll be a part of the white management class. That's why all immigrants coming to America are classified as blacks and above blacks. Now, the lower level, the third level down, that's what blacks are. That was the working class. They could not get anything. Anybody else could get 650 acres of land as soon as they set foot in the country. And even that's why George Washington got 100,000 acres of free land. Thomas Jefferson picked up 100,000 acres of free land that's been passed on to all of his generational descendants. That's why Patrick Henry got 65,000 acres of free land. That's why white immigrants coming to America picked up over 1 billion acres of free land. Didn't pay a penny for it. That's how they got all these big farms out west and ranches. They didn't pay for that land. They got it free in land rushes. As a matter of fact, the last land rush of 1862 gave every immigrant 160 acres of free land. But when black folks in the 1860s asked for 40 acres of mule, they said, y'all not entitled to anything. They've never received anything. So I found it's illogical and insulting for anybody to say that black folk have gotten everything they wanted and they're not victims. And I wrote the affirmative action plans. I know what they had and what they didn't get. Secondly, it says here that you all got control of all the major cities, so you're dominating them. Again, that's a farce and a game and a sham and an insult for black folk. You see, because when the civil rights movement started in the 1950s, white folk then did not want to integrate with black folk. And what they said is that if we're going to rather integrate with black folk in these major cities, we're going to create a new concept that we're going to call suburbs and exoburbs, which means we'll move out of these major cities if black folk want to integrate. And what they did, they took the 1956 Highway Act and used it to build expressways through every major city in the north and in the south. They built major expressways through it. And guess what? They ran those expressways right through the heart of every black community in the United States. And so that the whites could have a fast way of getting out of these cities and moving to the exurbs or the suburbs and build new communities. Point one. Point two, they didn't practice what they call a burnt field category, which means that not only will we move away from you black folk, but we're going to practice a scorched earth policy, which means everything that was in those cities in the 1950s and 1960s, we're going to move it out, use those highways and move it out to the suburbs. We're going to move out all the businesses, the industries, the factories, the banks, and all and the wealth power and the voting power in those cities will be transferred outside the city. So the economic base for those major cities will sit outside of those major cities. Let black folk, they said, inherit those major cities, but they cannot run them. They cannot be effective in government because there won't be any money in them. We're going to abandon them and take everything of value out and put it in the suburbs. And then we're going to tell the black folk, if you all want to have anything, since we own and control everything, you got to get in your car and drive out to our suburbs and buy it from us and give us your money. That way we can continue to get 98 cents out of every dollar that you get. It comes in your hands, you bring it back to us and put it back in our hands in the suburbs. That was called urban renewal. And they started urban renewal and what some people later called black removal. And the same process now, here we are 50 years later, they're getting ready to run the same game on black folk. And now instead of calling it urban renewal and black removal, they're going to call it gentrification, where they're going to come into these cities where black folk inherited way back 50 years ago with no resources, no wealth, no power. Wealth and power was in the hands of the whites in the suburbs. They dictated what went on in those major cities. They told the black city councils and black mayors what they could and could not do because they didn't have any money. And then the state legislators in all those major states then would not allow those urban cities to do very much in terms of gaining wealth and money. They shut them down and passed all kinds of laws that restricted blacks because white folks said we're going to eventually go back and recapture that land under gentrification. And then when we recapture it under gentrification, we're going to move to the second step. It's called to be capitalized on them and convert all those any resources in those cities by privatizing them into the hands of the white society. As it is in Detroit, Michigan, I wrote down that time there'll be 25 things in Detroit, Michigan, that when the whites come back out of the Michigan suburbs, they're going to take back from a city like Detroit, Michigan, and blacks will be bankrupt. And that's what happened to them. I tried to build a black community to stop it, but the silly blacks in government there, except for a few on the city, kept a few blacks on the city council, understood and they tried to be supportive. But the majority of blacks in the city of Detroit did not understand. They wanted whites to come back and bring back all the wealth they had taken out of the city and renew the city in the hands of whites. And what they also renew was not only the wealth back into the city, but they're going to take over the bridge to Canada and put that in the hands of whites. They're going to take the underground bridge, underwater bridge tunnel to between Detroit and Canada. They can generate money and revenue. They're going to put that in the hands of whites. They're going to privatize the golf course, all the waterfront land, Cobalt Hall, Joe Louis Arena. They're going to privatize the city airport into the hands of whites. That's going to go on all over the country in 2019, all the way up to about the next 10 years, about 2030. Started also with Washington, D.C. When I first came to Washington, D.C., it was called Chocolate City. And now blacks made up 78% of the population. Now in 2019, blacks are down to about 38% now. They're going down. Now the city is being monopolized and being taken over by immigrants, and the dominant white society is coming back to take over everything and run the city. Instead of being Chocolate City, it's going to be a pink city. So I don't know where this person gets this playing this game about you all had the cities and you got civil rights laws. The civil rights laws of 1965 were corrupted too. They were supposed to have been for black folk. The whole purpose of the 1965 civil rights laws should have been to correct what slavery had done to black folk, to recapture some of those resources that had been maldistributed. Slavery maldistributed 100% of the country's land, minerals, businesses, corporations, income, privileges, rights, and controls of all levels of government to the hands of dominant white society. The 1965 and 1964 civil rights laws should have been targeted trying to redistribute those resources. And black folks should have said, we're not concerned about integration. Integration is a weakening process. We don't want you to destroy our communities by black removal and by gentrification. Just make sure we got the resources we know we need to be a competitive people. Don't destroy our schools. But they didn't do that. They went for social integration, which totally tore up all those cities. And all those cities again look like bombed out Beirut, nothing but blank, but vacant lots, abandoned buildings, no factories, no buildings, no jobs, poverty and everything, and no employment opportunities. Black folks should have been taught and encouraged to have their own business and employ their own people, provide their own resources, income, and tax base. But they said, no, we'll come back and get those cities, and we're going to boycott you all, and not won't spend one penny in your businesses, and let you come to our business in the suburb and give us your money. And therefore, whites now get 98 cents out of every dollar that passes through a black person's hand in these big major urban cities. That wealth goes back into the white folks' pockets, and that money in value is doubling and tripling every 20 years. And consequently, pretty soon blacks will be totally null and void. And this individual is talking about, well, you all had civil rights. Civil rights have been taken over by fabricated minorities in this country. They've created all kinds of fabricated minorities to ignore black folk and give those rights and privileges that black folk had never, ever received from 1516 up to now, present day 2019. They never got it. And so this individual, again, I don't know whether he's black or white, but again, he's pushing his old BS that black folk got special privileges, special rights, and they were not victims. Anybody got any sense past about a third grade education that understand history would know better. That's why this individual should go buy my library pack. Those 5 books that would educate them. So in the future, he would not make those kind of stupid remarks that are insult to black folk. But anyhow, that was the second part of that one. Now, the other thing I need to be addressing for you is this whole question that one woman wrote. One woman up here, and I can't figure out why. She's just determined to know why I'm so intent on trying to help black folk. And I looked at her things here. What she's saying is, Dr. Anderson, your skin complexion is not black. You're a Caucasian. Was your grandfather Caucasian? Do you realize, sir, that we're in a patriarchal society? Where'd you get your lineage from? Your father's side? In essence, you're a Caucasian. You're not. You can't be black. So let me inform you and educate you. There's no such people could be called black people. My grandmama told me long ago in the 50s and 60s that they were Indians. Blacks isn't a color. It's not a race or a people. And see, I can go on and on. But sir, again, that shows either stupidity or just outright rank ignorance. But why she's so determined to try to prevent me from being black, I have no idea. But why can't I be black? My mother and father were black. All my relatives are black. Children are black. Why is it nobody wants me to be black? Because I defend black folk. And so I was laughing about that. And here's a book right here called Who is Black? That was written back in the 1990s, and by this fellow. And in the book, he says very specifically that who is the black? Dr. Claude Goke, and they said, you want to know who's black? The reference is contact Dr. Claude Anderson, and it's stipulated on one of the pages, 75, I think page 75 in that book, that he determines what was black. He gives you the explanation of who is black. And this woman said there is no black people. See, that shows how far she is. The most powerful thing on earth and in the heavens is blackness. If you were to leave this earth and take a trip any place in outer space, you'll find the most powerful thing is blackness. Any place you go, blackness is a extreme force of blackness. We got the black holes in outer space that are so powerful. They're 20 million times stronger than the sun. They got the ability to be able to draw anything into the black hole and destroy it, can destroy matter. The blackness is power in the outer spheres of this earth. Now on this earth, the most powerful things on the earth is blackness. Whether the plants, the food you eat, or if you go to the color spectrum, and you can have all kind of colors in the color categories. You can have pink, yellow, green, brown, whatever you want. The most powerful color is black. Black will dominate any color on the earth in the color spectrum. Black will run over any of those other colors. If I were to put blackness in terms of on paint, the black color will harden faster and will last longer than any other color. Blackness is power. and whites have always identified that and felt that. That's why back in when they passed the national origin law back in 1924, they said, be very careful. They told whites, be very careful in 1924 about blackness. They said blackness is so powerful that you only take one drop of black blood can make you black. But yeah, and you can have a jar of black blood that can't make you anything else. It can't make you white. Black will dominate any blood you can come into. That's why they passed those laws about blackness is power and origin. And on this woman, what she fails to understand is that I love black folk, and I've always been black all my life, and I'm going to stay black. But blackness is more than what she's saying. She says like skin color. Yes, it can be a skin color. It should be a skin color, just like whiteness is a skin color. When whites came to this country, they called themselves white Puritans. White Puritans back in the early 1600s. They put white in front of the Puritans. Then after about 50 or 60 years, they changed from being Puritans to becoming Europeans. Then they said white Europeans would dominate and control the country. But they always kept that whiteness in front of it. Then later on, when they got to the 1800s, when they had a big emphasis on the Europeans coming into the country from different aspects of the European society, rather than Northern Europeans started coming in, and Western Europeans started coming in, and Southern Europeans started coming in. They said, well, when we get there, we don't want to be affiliated with those slaves because slavery is now ended, and we can't give it. The country's been built. That the whites were the management class and the ownership class, and the black were the labor class, but we can't give them any credit for building this nation. We can't give blacks, the black laboring class, all those millions of blacks that built the roads, cleaned the land, got rid of the snakes, the trees, and built the canals, built the buildings, built everything. They were the ones that worked in the factories, the shipyards without any pay. We can't give them credit as a laboring class to have built the nation. We got to make sure all the credit goes to the ownership class, the white ownership class, and the white management class. And so they said at that point, any Europeans coming here, we come over there, we're going to stick behind our name. We're going to stick our country of origin. If I'm coming in from Italy, I'm going to call Italian Americans, or I'm going to call Polish Americans, or French Americans, or German Americans, because they wanted to, at that point in time, since slavery was ending and Lincoln was coming into office, they wanted to disaffiliate any credit going to black folk for what they've done in this country to build this country. At that point in time, they started using this word African, because they said, now if we call it, let's make them look like savages again, and that way we can export them out of the country. And now we don't need them anymore, because now we got Europeans coming in here. They're going to be the new working class, and we don't need no black working class. Let's get rid of all these blacks by calling them Africans and savages. And what we do, let's ship them to the Bahamas or to Haiti, or let's ship them to Texas, set up a special piece of land in Texas for just shipping them there. Or even better, let's ship them back to Liberia in Africa and make them look like savages. That way we don't have to ever give them credit for anything. And so that when they started that in the late 1860s, then all the whites coming to America identified again with their country of origin coming from Europe. And that stayed true up until about the 1940s. In the 1940s, when black folks started pushing for integration, and they said they're going to start pushing for integration for themselves, that scared white folk. And white folks said we can't be divided, because what these black folk are pushing for is social integration, which is what they call universality, and we can't afford to be divided by being a French or an Italian or a German or a Polish or a Jewish. We got to come together as a group. Let's get rid of those words in front of our name. We don't want to be Jewish Americans or French Americans or Polish Americans. And so what they did is let's just simply be white Americans. So at that point, white people dropped everything from the back of it. What they kept was only the whiteness. They said they're going to come together as a team. No more Italian communities, French communities, Jewish communities. It's just white communities, period. And see, some of our people never understood that. And what they want to do, they say, well, we want to be African Americans. You can't be an African American. The worst thing you can do is to claim to be an African American, because you see, Africans didn't contribute to the building of this land. They did not send one boat over here in 500 years to rescue any blacks. Those blacks that came here as slaves, they neutered on the boats. When they got into the American continent, they were stripped. They went through a seasoning process. They were stripped of all Africanness. They were stripped of their culture, their history, their language. They were given new names. They were taught to think and think through the eyes of the white master. They became new people altogether. They became Native Americans. And now, if you start calling them African Americans, what you've done there is to strip them of the credit that they deserve for having built this nation. But more importantly, you strip the indebtedness that this country has to replicate and repair those black folk that built this nation. That's why I call them Native Black Americans. They're different from any blacks coming from the Caribbean or from Africa or from Europe. They're different. They're not necessarily better, but they are different. They so be treated in a special category and recognize what they did in building this country. If you call them African Americans, you strip them of their uniqueness and learning how to behave, their culture they developed in this country, how they learn how to stick together and try to fight and survive. And these people coming from Africa, they are from Caribbean. They were always more privileged in coming to this country than Native blacks. That's why up until about 1950s, a black person wanted to get over and go into a white restaurant or white hotel, and he couldn't go there as a Native Black American. He could get special rights and privileges if he were simply go put on some boots and put a dashiki on, or a cape on, or put a hood on, or wrap a diaper around his head, anything. He could go into a white restaurant, a white hotel, and pretend that he was speaking an African language, saying, "Osha Buddha, I'm from Africa, blah, blah." And he could get in and get away with things that Native blacks could do. So everybody, any immigrant coming to America, whether they were coming from Africa or from the Caribbean or any place in the world, whether they were French, German, Hispanic, Asians, or Arabs, they could always come in and be lifted above Native blacks. So Native blacks cannot give up that special status, that special exceptionism they have in this country by saying, we are Native Black Americans. We are entitled to a special kind of respect, appreciation, recognition, and reparations. And to that end, I want you to stay fixed, and we'll pick up where I left off at this point on our next commentary. And this is Dr. Claude Anderson on Connecting the Dots. I try to connect the dots for your day. I'll connect them next time you come to the PowerKnowledge.com YouTube channel. So be loved and keep the faith. Thank you.